been reading stuff, and I was just like, I don't really understand why I'm here. I'm reading white work as a Black person. Like, thanks for recruiting me, sort of, but I don't want to be reading this, and it has nothing to do with my work or my life. And there's other ways that we could better support artists like me or other artists out there in the world, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Are we streaming live?
Yeah, we all got quiet when we saw the streaming thing pop up. We're like, we are all very serious now.
Listen, I'll say the same thing I just said. But I was
I was just like, wait, does that say live on?
Okay.
Live on. Okay.
We can't hear you, Dave. Dave, we're live. Are we ready to start though?
Or should we start, or should we?
He said. Okay, one second. Yeah, because they're streaming on YouTube and then also on like the I think main page for OutWrite and then on the Discord as well. So they're getting all set up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just as a side note, I think that like awards should have a section for queer Afro-Guyanese poets who are close to me.
Yeah, queer Afro-Guyanese poet of the year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that would be important.
Who's wearing green earrings? Also add that in.
How'd you know?
I wondering.
Maybe even just a Scorpio section. You want a Scorpio
right,
section?
Right. Oh, right.
Like,
there it is. Right.
Yeah.
You know, we can add some other flavor to that if you would like.
Yes. Yeah, just make it a little bit more robust. Some saison, if you will. Not from Goya though.
Not from Goya.
Fucking Goya.
I'm so mad at Goya. Like,
Fucking
oh
Goya.
My goodness. I don't want to put down that ginger beer. That makes me so sad. I'd like take stuff out of my fridge. Like, why y'all making me get rid of good food?
Put it down, baby. Put it down. They weren't even like they are not even Latinx. They're literally from Spain.
I thought just is the whole company from Spain? I thought just the
family
CEO
is from Spain.
I did not know that.
I believe so. I believe so. I can do the research, but I believe that everyone that I've talked to and that they've capitalized on the Latinx communities. Yeah, baby. That's what folks in the community have told me. And that's why they say, and that's why when they talk about the company, they call it Hispanic and not Latinx.
Oh.
Well, not Latino, but that's what they say. It's because they're from Spain.
They're literally listen.
And white as the driven snow, baby.
Oh my goodness.
White as the driven snow.
All right. Dave gives us a thumbs up. So is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm ready.
Be ready.
Great. So everyone who's watching us, I know we're streaming on multiple platforms. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm bringing my notes up here. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. And before we begin, I think it's important to take a moment to recognize the conditions in which we meet. So if you're joining us from anywhere on the continent known now as North America, I'd ask us to all take a moment to acknowledge that we meet on land that was stolen in communities that were built by people who were enslaved. So Cece and I join you from a part of Maryland that's stolen from the Piscataway, and the DC Center is located on Nacotchtank land. I also want to thank Rodney Laban, tonight's ASL interpreter. Thank you so much, Rodney. And again, thank you all for joining us for this event for the first night of OutWrite 2020. We're going to bring the mood up a bit because tonight is about celebration and kicking off the festival and this amazing new book, the Black Trans Prayer Book, and its amazing co-editors, as well as tonight's brilliant host. So some of you are here because you're fans of the podcast and you don't yet know our guests. And some of you are here because you know our guests and you don't yet know about our podcast. And some of you are here because you're excited to kick off the 2020 OutWrite Festival with us. And you want to learn about everyone who's on your screen right now. So regardless of why you're here, welcome. Let me start by talking about the podcast. My co-host Cece is going to introduce Saida in just a minute, who's going to introduce the guest. But I want to tell you about Lit Pop Bang. We're a monthly literary podcast that hosts a writer or editor each episode to talk about their work, pop culture, and what's going on in the world. We're a production of Mason Jar Press, a Baltimore-based independent publisher, and we're proudly queer and woman of color led. You can find us on the Mason Jar Press website or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on Apple and we're on, I think, Stitcher and all those places. So wherever you listen to us, just look us up, Lit Pop Bang. This is our third year that OutWrite has invited us to come host one of their sort of main event, feature, flagship events for the festival. And we're so honored that they ask us back every year. The last 3 years, they've invited us to talk to one of their invited guests, and we infuse like a little bit of the podcast into the event, and then we make the audio of the event available for our episode for that month. So the first year we hosted Michelle T, and last year we had Kristen Arnett, and this year we're so excited to host this year's conversation. So tonight's gonna be a little different from past festivals for us in that we're handing the entire conversation over to our very close friend, Saida Agostini. Saida will guide the conversation with tonight's guest, and we'll just pop in after it's done with a few questions. And then we'll pull any questions that you, the audience, may have out of the chat. So Dave is gonna help us with that. After tonight, you can track us down on social media, or you open up your podcast app and just Google Lit Pop Bang, and you will find tonight's conversation along with all of our past episodes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host for the evening, Cece, who will introduce our amazing host. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome for being here. The only thing I think Anthony missed in his fantastic introduction is I don't think we thanked OutWrite, right? I don't think we, yeah, I was like, I don't think we thanked this fantastic festival that we've been doing for the past 3 years. And also the fantastic leader, Dave Ring, who has been at the helm of this fantastic organization and also the Literary Festival. And we're very grateful to him for continuing to include us and also for continuing to put on this fantastic literary festival. So as Anthony said, I'm Cece, and I'm here to introduce our fantastic poet, interviewer, friend of mine, person I eat cheese with, all kinds of fantastic things. But despite saying all of that, I'm going to read her formal bio, and then we'll jump into the conversation. Saida Agostini is a queer Afro-Guyanese poet whose work explores the ways that Black folks harness mythology to enter the fantastic. Saida's poetry can be found in Barrel House Magazine, the Black Ladies Brunch Collective anthology, Not Without Our Laughter, and other multiple online and in-print publications. Her first collection of poems, Just Let the Dead In, yay, was a finalist for the Center of African American Poetry and Poetics 2020 Book Prize. Very excited for that, as well as the New Issues Poetry Prize. Her first chapbook is coming out this fall. It's called Entitled Stunt, and it will be released by Neon Hemlock. A Cave Canem graduate and fellow, Saida has been awarded honors and support for her work by the Watering Hole and Blue Mountain Center, as well as a 2018 Ruby's Grant funding travel to Guyana to support the completion of her first manuscript. She lives online at www.saidaagostini.com. She also has an Instagram. I don't know that handle. She can tell it to you herself. And she's also on Twitter as well. Saida is a good friend. She's a fantastic poet, collective member, and it's an honor for me to present her tonight. So Saida, I'm kicking it off to you.
Aw, well, thank you so much. Hi, everyone out there in the YouTube and Facebook world. In case you want to find me on the gram, I'm at Prince and the Revolution. I don't know how I got that name, that title, other than the fact that I stole it. But, you know, Prince ain't asked for it back yet, or Prince's people, I should say. I am so honored and excited to be here, just to witness all the brilliance of Cece and Anthony, and also to get to give a huge Luther Vandross style welcome to the magnificence, the brilliance, and the straight up badassery, or acidity, if you will, of J. Mace III and Lady Dane Figueroa Aditi. Welcome, y'all.
Hey, boo, that was hilarious. Because you know Prince's people would, if they wanted their name back, they would, baby, in a heartbeat. Okay.
Listen, and I ain't got no money. I got a bag full of gold, and that's about it. They could claim that back in a second, but let's hope they don't do that. All right, so let me introduce y'all formally so we could get into the meat or the tofu, if you will, of today's interview. I'm really, really honored to introduce Jay Mace III. He is a Black trans queer poet and educator based in Seattle. He is the author of Then I Got Fired, one trans queer's reflections on grief, unemployment, and inappropriate jokes about death. And also the founder, I beg your pardon, of Awkward, the first ever trans and queer people of color specific talent agency. He co-edits the Black Trans Prayer Book with Lady Dane Figueroa Ididi. His latest book, White Folks Be Trippin', an ethnography through poetry and prose, is available for purchase via print and ebook. And
Yes.
now I get to introduce y'all to Dane. Dane, dubbed the ancient jazz priestess of Mother Africa, Lady
Yes.
Dane Figueroa Ididi is a Nigerian, Cuban, indigenous, American performance artist, author, teacher, choreographer, priestess, speech writer, playwright, writing coach, advocate, healer, a founding member of Force Coalition, and two-time Helen Hayes Award nominee. All right.
Well, six times.
Six
Gotta
times.
claim all of it. Gotta claim all of it.
Got corrected. All right. She is the founder of the Inanna D initiatives, which curates, produces, and cultivates events and initiatives designed to center and celebrate the work of transgender, gender, and gender nonconforming artists of color. Considered one of the most prolific artists of our time, she is the first trans woman of color to be nominated for a Helen Hayes Award. She has also co-starred as Patra in the new web series King Esther, which I'm about to start watching. I'm so excited. And her latest book, Infrastructure of a Nation, will be released in August 2020. Well, damn, after those bios, I'm like laid out already. Welcome, y'all.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for having us. Yes.
So I just want to frame this and one, thank y'all so much for sharing the Black Trans Prayer Book out here in the world. Tonight we're going to be talking about it. I'm really excited to hear about y'all's perspective on how you made this beautiful, beautiful being come into life. And I really wanted to just start with the practice that y'all offer actually in the book itself. Who are the Black trans elders and ancestors who helped you to get here? Don't you love it when you're just in shock at your own deepness? Yeah.
I feel like there's so many folks, like I think when I go back to even just like in spiritual spaces, I think of Charlene, who was a minister over where I was in Philly, was a Black trans minister, who really was the first trans person that I saw in a leadership role within a religious tradition, and is to me someone that gave me permission to take up more space in my own spiritual discernment. So I think she's the number one person that I think about.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So many, right? I mean, like we can go back to the 1800s to Miss, Mary Jones, Frances Thompson, Lucy Anderson Hicks, Marsha P, and then, my Auntie Jimmy, all of those Baltimore trans women in the 80s who were fierce and would come to the apartment and giggle and laugh and live fully in their womanhood, goddesshood, etc., divine selves, but who who did not make it because of the AIDS crisis. And so those women too, right, are here. Their spirits are here. And their spirits are still investing in us, not only surviving, but thriving and shifting the world. So many. Those are just a few.
Thank you. I always love to start off with something like that because I think the energy shifts, right? Like when we think and like we can remember and honor the folks that have brought us here to this moment. So just know how much gratitude I hold for y'all's generosity and grace. And the next question I have actually came straight from Mace, who was like, "You need to ask this question." So,
He's
so
like,
I,
look at me, look
you
at
know. So, when I'm told to do something, I do it. Well, always, not always.
me.
But who is this work for?
Yeah, who is this?
Like
one?
trans people.
Exactly. So yeah, and so definitively it is for Black trans people. It is for, if other people get something out of it, I think that's great. That's wonderful. The reality is something that Dana and I talk about very often is we don't believe that there's any violence that happens to Black trans people that is not in some way informed by the religious violence that is inspired by traditions that cause Black trans people to be dehumanized on a regular basis, right? Like it's one thing to say that I don't like you. It's another thing to say that not even my God or my gods like you or will accept your presence, right? And so regardless of whether or not we ourselves are religious, we are absorbing all this spiritual trauma from all these different people that will dictate our rights and our values, that will dictate what our relationships look like, that will dictate what our family lives look like, that will dictate what our legal and civic lives look like, our job lives, all that different stuff. And so we deserve to have spaces to get rid of and heal from the spiritual trauma of that on a daily basis. And so that's what, to me, in my mind, that's what this book is for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think it is also an edification, right, of our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Because we existed, right? We existed before colonization. We existed before white people. We existed, and we're still existing. We have this hashtag that says trans people exist because our ancestors existed. And so I think about I think about the work that happened behind the scenes in order to make the book happen. And we are inheritors, every Black trans person, of a deep and ancient spiritual legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is it is a call to action. It is a balm, right? BALM. Remember that they used to say about Jesus. Remember that? I hope that was just enough that y'all don't get sued for me singing it. Aaron Clark gonna be out here like, excuse me, Twinkie. I think Twinkie wrote that one. It is, there's so much, there's so many things about healing, remembering, calls to action, loving, right? And loving yourself in a very real and tangible way, not just in this way that, white supremacist Christian Abrahamic doctrine says, right? Where you can learn to love yourself now, right? Mm-hmm. This book is about us recognizing that we are worthy of heaven now.
Yes.
We are worthy to make an earth that is heaven now. We are worthy of thriving, doing more than surviving. We are worthy of being loved now and cared about and enjoying pleasure and smiling and being in community and all of ourselves now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you just came through with a sermon. And I feel like it's time to pass around the collection plate. I know I'm going to tithe this week.
Again, we are trying to build a documentary out of the book. So if you do want to pass around the tithe,
right.
And thanks to the good Lord of the internet, we do take cash, credit cards, debit cards, PayPal, Cash App, anything that you got, we will accept today. So just tell your friends, okay?
Yeah.
So when both of y'all spoke, and then I think also Dane, I heard this really deeply resonating in your words as well, is I feel like both of y'all are talking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like really talking about like a liberation theology, right? Like It's not enough just to promise us the heaven above, but we deserve to have heaven right now, right?
Yeah, and to me, just thinking about that, just so this is the first book of its kind that centers a Black trans theology in this time in history, right? So as Dane is talking about ancestors, we acknowledge that there are ancestors in Black trans deities and people and entities that create a pathway for us. And so much of that was so intentionally erased from colonization, so intentionally erased from by the legal system, so intentionally erased by religious leaders that were in collusion with white supremacy and still to this day are, right? And so it's, to me, even when I think about so-called LGBTQ affirming religious spaces, often many of them are not affirming of Black trans people, period, right? They might be affirming of like a cisgender white norm. They might be semi-affirming of cisgender Black and brown people, but they have no sense of what does it mean to have a theology that centers and uplifts Black trans people, to the point that you might go into a religious institution and ask a religious leader, well, how am I affirmed by this text? And they might say something simple like, well, God is love. That is really cute, but that is not good enough, because the people that legislate against me every day have a much stronger theology against that. The people that might attack me in the street have a much stronger theology than that. The people that will spend their days hating me and vilifying me in media have a much stronger theology than that. So you have to be intentional with that language. So when we're creating a liberation theology and centering this Black trans liberation theology, we're not simply just doing this in opposition to a lot of the conservative tactics that are used against us, but also sometimes the lack of intentionality, even in spaces that perceive themselves to be on our side, that still have not done the work and refuse to do so and refuse to share space, right? That we are carving that space for ourselves with this theology.
I love that. And I think for me, that kind of brings up, there's so many questions I want to get to. So Celeste, definitely text me if I'm like running over time, because I'm good.
Artists are gracious, so we'll talk all day. So just
So I have to say, so when I got to go to the opening a few weeks ago, I felt that, I felt like that urgency of joy and that reclamation of pleasure, and how it just felt so expansive, right? Y'all have folks who were reading who were brilliant, but you could also maybe tell they were shy, but wherever they were at, they were welcomed and not just acknowledged, but honored, right? And so one of the things I'm really curious about is if you could tell us a little bit about the process of developing the book and what that experience was like for y'all.
Yeah, so so one thing that we were very certain of, right, is that we wanted to do a healing retreat that that basically we would have a week where we would all be together, us and a few of the contributors, right? And also a part of, I just want to also just add into that is that we also wanted to make sure that everything was paid for. So that I think so often, right, people have these retreats and the pre-COVID, right, before COVID, people would have these retreats and they're like, okay, well, your hotel might be covered, but you got to pay for your airplane ticket. And it's like, what? Have you caught an airplane? Your hotel room might be covered, but you have to pay to get to the venue from the airport, right? Or you have to pay for your own food, and you have to take off of work in order to do that, right? So it was really deeply important for us to be intentional from the beginning, where we also understood that part of that, that religious-based violence that Jay Mace was talking about earlier, that economic violence is a part of that, right? The economic violence that Black trans people face is born from that they use that religion, right? They use that white supremacist Abrahamic ideology to basically justify the economic violence that impacts us. And so because we are Black trans people, and because we have so often been invited to these retreats and have, we were we wanted to make it very different. And it was a few days of a bunch of us together, about 17 of us, I believe, 17 or 18 of us together.
Something like that, yeah.
And we did some workshops, we did some meditations, and we ate together, right? We had family dinners. And it was beautiful. And I mean, of course, before there, right, there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of me and Mace crying, encouraging one another, because there were a lot of funders pre 2019, right, who didn't quite understand why this book was important. And when I say they didn't understand why this book was important, I'm saying that they intentionally operated from a white supremacist ideological framework, which told them that we are only worthy of being loved when they are the white savior.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so this book, right, this book says that it holds white people accountable, right, by virtue of centering Black trans people, and it allows for us to celebrate, center, love on ourselves, and also call for accountability.
Mm.
So that was first, right? All of the, and the writing of the grants and
And that
then
took 2.5 years
yes,
for us to get
Wow.
that
yeah,
money. 2.5 years to get that money.
Yeah.
yeah. And then the retreat, and then after the retreat, we got more contributors, right?
Mhm.
We applied for more grant money because it was always our desire to see more. I don't want to say see, that feels so ableist, to have the space, which is the book, be filled with more people. So then we had a little mini meeting, with those folks. We did one-on-ones. And I mean, that was essentially like the short of the long, even though that was very long of me.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like even within that, so even as Dane's talking about, as we, raise money for this retreat, I don't know about anybody else on this live. I don't know about anybody else who's watching who's been part of an anthology or anything like that. But the most I've ever been paid for like an anthology was like $100. If that, usually what you get paid is like a copy of the book, right? Like that's usually what you do.
Yeah.
And so when Dane's saying we got this stuff, we wanted to make sure people's stuff was paid for. We paid our contributors anywhere between $500 to $1,000, right, depending on where they, like, if they were at the retreat, they got $1,000 plus their food and stuff and their housing paid for. If they were just doing it remotely, we gave people $500. And so that's why it took that much time for us to raise that money, and telling funders who wanted to only fund us if we could be giving them only sob stories and not stories about healing, right?
Right.
And trying to get folks to say that Black trans people's healing is important. It took so many tears, and saying that we wanted to pay people equitably. There are so many people that do not believe that we deserve a fair paycheck, and saying that one in 3 Black trans people makes less than $10,000 a year, right? And that we know that this is not just about the book, it's about us sustaining each other, right? That took a lot of energy, a lot of coaching up to funders and talking to them about what their actual responsibilities were, and where especially LGBT funders got their money from and where it needs to return.
And a lot of fighting and a lot of reading, honey. A lot of reading. We had one funder who was shady boots, baby. When I tell you this funder was shady, we did 3 rounds of a motherfucking grant, and this motherfucking funder was shady boots. And I told Mace after the first meeting, I said, these people ain't trying to give us that money. And they kept saying, oh, we just want y'all to resubmit. We don't, and they had the audacity to say to us, we don't understand how this pertains to gender justice.
For those on the podcast, we're all making faces right now.
And when I tell you, I said, oh, baby. I said, you know what? It's good. We're going to get this money. I said,
Yo, it got to a point one day, me and Dane, we got a funder gave us more money than what we asked for. Like we were asking for a specific set of money, and they gave us more. I think they like doubled it. Like it was like, I literally had the silence phone. I was in tears. I was like, this is like, cause it's just so much energy, just trying to get people to think about you as deserving, you know? And so you get used to being talked to in all kinds of messed up ways that it sometimes catches off guard when people are like, oh no, we're actually already with you. We're with you, you know?
I mean, I think you said a whole word right there. I mean, y'all just been dropping. I mean, this is literally the Black Trans Prayer Book, and I feel like we're actually getting sermons from the book right now. Because I think like when you talk about like the rigor, right, that y'all held yourselves, not only yourselves, but you held others to, in terms of saying, this is what we as a people deserve. This is what we deserve for our art. And no, we're not going to cut it to fit your construct of who we are. I mean, I just think that's like fucking amazing and powerful. And it's such a beautiful model, I think, to witness as artists, as other artists. So that's just incredible to see. And, you know, and I think that kind of also speaks to some of the practices that you see weaved into the actual book itself. So when I read the book, one of the things that I really loved is the rituals that y'all had at the, like, kind of bookending the sections, right? And it really kind of made me just fall in love with the text as a whole. Can you tell us a little bit about why it felt important to offer these practices as a part of the anthology?
Yeah,
You want to
so
dive in, Mace? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so for us, we wanted this to be a tool that people could use right then in the moment, right? So we wanted to also that we go through so many different things, like maybe you want more liberation, maybe you want more creation story, maybe you want more things about love, right? So we wanted people to be able to choose how they weave through the book. And we also, we wanted to be a living document. Like I remember back in the day with my grandmother, she used to like open up her text and she would just point to a scripture. She's like, this is the word of the day, right? It's like, this is what I'm, for all the Baptists and Pentecostals in the room, right? Like that's just what it was, right? And so we want people to like be able to open up different parts of this text and find something that speaks to them. We're getting so many messages from people who said, today I flipped to this page, as soon as I got it, and this was the word that I just wanted to live with for the day, or this is the prayer that came through for me today, or this is we have everything from like I did like a prayer for TSA stuff and going through TSA to people doing prayers around binding and tucking to folks doing rituals around their kitchen magic and things like that to Psalms for sex workers and so we wanted to make sure that every and any Black, trans, and non-binary person can connect with this text immediately, that they do not need to have some sort of ordination, that they, as a Black trans person who manifested themselves in a world that is anti-Black, that is trans antagonistic all the time, know that they have enough power within themselves to divine and discern within the text already.
Thank you. Yeah, and I do remember that. Like, I remember like my granny would like just flip through the Bible and just say like, this is it. And sometimes they'd be weird texts too. Like I'm like, but Granny, what, how, huh? Like I just remember being very confused about why I needed to know about David's wife. But you couldn't really question it at the time, or in my house you would get beat. Yeah. So we've got time for one more question, and before we close out this part and we give it back to Cece and Anthony, just know how much gratitude, love, and just such a deep honoring I'm holding for y'all in your work. I have my own copy of Black Trans Prayer Book. I hope other folks get their copies as well. And they
should get it off our site because that's where it's the cheapest. So don't get it off anyplace else. Get it off of the BlackTransPrayerBook.org. Way cheaper.
Say the most affordable. That's what I like to say.
That's better. That's nice. That is very polished.
I said ain't nothing cheap about it, baby.
Okay. There's a lot of energy, time, sweat, tears went into it. Ain't nothing cheap about it, okay?
Yeah. So my last question for y'all, and this is for both of you, is just what is your hope for the Black Trans Prayer Book?
Mace and I have talked about this before. So I think, one, I think that he mentioned earlier that we're working on a documentary, right? So I actually, I want us to be able to raise, more than all the money that we have allotted, right? For us to be able to really do this documentary, because I think that there are some folks that the documentary could help. I think it's super important for the culture, I think, we've also talked about maybe there'd be several editions, right? So this is the first of many, because I think that, God, if you believe in God, if you believe in the gods, if you believe in the goddess, the Orisha, whoever you would like to, the Great Spirit, whoever you would like to call the divine one, right? If you believe in yourself, if you believe in ancestors as living, I believe that our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to divinity, our relationship to the universe is one that is not dead. God is not dead. And I think that what white supremacy has tried to tell us is that God is this stagnant thing. But I believe that as we grow and we expand, that our relationship with God expands. And because of that, it is so deeply important and necessary for us to be in spiritual space where we are allowed, where we are honored with the words of many divine beings. Meaning, when I say divine beings, I mean literally Black trans people who are divine beings now in this flesh on this earth, who are in deep relationship with themselves. And because they're in deep relationships with themselves, they are by virtue in deep relationship with God. And how they are feeling about that and what they are thinking. And maybe what they have to say can activate some joy, some hope, some healing, some fight in others who are Black and trans, some inspiration, some love. So that's what I would like to see. I would like to see more additions. More contributors, more expansion.
Yeah. I think just even with that piece around, God is not dead, that whole stagnation piece, it's like the reality is all living things grow and shift and move and change. And we've very much been so I just want to reaffirm that we've been very much told that just because someone 2,000 years ago or 200 years ago, or their pastor who doesn't actually understand the text, right? But keeps like passing down a very whack theology throughout the generations, just because that person couldn't change, doesn't mean that our hearts, our space, our acknowledgement of ourselves can't shift, that God is not also an always ever expanding presence. I would like for every Black, trans, and non-binary person from this book, whether you are a person of faith or you've been pushed out of faith spaces, I don't care if you are Christian, Muslim, Lakumi, Ifa, or none of those above. I don't care if you're an atheist. I want this to be a space in which we get to be honest about who we are, and that is magical, that is transformative, that is a very powerful group of people. And I want people who consistently use terrible theologies against us. I hope they get to stop lying about who we are. And so we get to take up space and to share theologies and not shy away from stuff. I always tell people, like, you can engage me in a religious conversation. I want you to, okay? I want you to try to trip me up because you can, okay? Because it impacts so much of our daily lives, I really want them to stop lying about who Black trans people are.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank y'all again so much. Just sending so much love to both of y'all. And I'm just going to pass it over to Cece and Anthony.
Thank you. I love me some you, child.
Yes. Yes.
So much love.
Thank you all so much. It was such an amazing conversation.
What a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, really great to hear this from all three of you. And again, thank you, Rodney, for making it possible as well.
So we are also looking at our chat room to make sure if we have any questions, that those questions get answered. So we're also
so each of us have an answer of a question, but if
we do, but we want to be mindful that the audience might have questions as well. But yes, so I don't know, should I go or should you go? It's up to you.
I'm good either way. While we're asking our questions, if any questions do come up, feel free to ask them in for those of you in the Discord. That's a great place to ask them, and they'll get sent over to us as well. Right. I can start if you'd like.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, because my question actually relates to that sort of the note you all left us on, which is that hearing you talk, so much of what you describe seems to be a trans Black interfaith practice, interfaith practices. And so I would love if you could talk to how that informed your making of the book and your fundraising and making of the documentary, how making sure trans Black people across faith and those who don't have a traditional faith, how you've made sure they're included in your mission and in your work.
Yeah, well, so a few different things. I mean, we both come from multi-faith backgrounds to start out with. So we both come from parents who are Christian and Muslim. Dane being a priestess in Lakumi traditions, right? Myself, sort of a hodgepodge of both Christianity, Islam, and other ancestor practices, you know, as they speak to me. So even the idea of inclusion for us, like we don't include nobody, we all at the table together collectively, right, making decisions, right? And so we intentionally, we're with our community. So these are conversations we're having with people all the time. We put out a call and we kind of went through and looked like what did people, where did people feel most connected and what did they want to spend time talking about and sharing with other folks. That's really what we did, was we took people, we had a nice range of people. For many of the folks that are in our book, it's the first time they've been published, right? For some of them, they've been published all the time. For some of them, they are ordained leaders in some sort of tradition, right? And so again, we made sure that we got people who weren't necessarily already heralded by some religious tradition, but people that, you know, understood their need to claim space in spiritual practice, right? So I would say that was more of our intentional piece. Yeah. I don't know, Dana, if there's other ways that you wanted to add to that, or did that make sense?
No, I think that was great. And I mean, like, I just want to reiterate, right, that like, even if you are atheist, you are impacted by,
Yes.
if you are a Black trans person, even if you are an atheist, you are impacted by religious violence, religious-based violence. Because
Yeah.
I mean, when we think about colonization, right, what, you know, white people did is that part of the violence that happened, right, is that they used the Bible to justify that violence.
And still happens that you still use
Today, right?
Today, right now.
Still happens today.
Oh.
And so I think that it's imperative for us to, you know, it's like, okay, you know, you don't necessarily in this moment have to have an opinion about whether God exists or not, but there are white people and there are lawmakers right now on Capitol Hill who are using their Bible to attempt to justify their trans antagonism and their transphobia.
And to me, just for people that might be watching, might be listening, might be in the chat, all of that, right? I want to be very clear. If you've ever heard someone say the word religion and you tensed up, or you got angry, or you glazed over, right? You're having a trauma response to religion, yes. Right? And correct. So because correct. That response, like, so even just like I'm seeing all y'all move, right? I'm watching, observing all y'all moving when I'm saying that, because we've all felt that. We didn't necessarily have language for it. And so right. I want, and I know Dane wants, we all want you all to have language for it, and you have a right to get rid of it. You have a Absolutely. Right to not have that tension and to have spaces to heal from that, and particularly Black trans folks, right?
Absolutely. I also, you know, part of it too, right, is that like, when I hear the word, oftentimes when I'm watching people get into fights, right, online about, you know, religion, when they say religion is bad, right, they're generally talking about the Abrahamic traditions. Mm-hmm. And like, there are so many more religions than that, right? Yes. And so I think part of it too, for me, right, is that like, you know, in indigenous cultures, Black, you know, who we now call trans people, right, were revered, were essential, were loved, were honored, were oftentimes holders of deep spiritual magic, right, and power and prominence, and that it was by design that when colonizers colonized the world, they intentionally went after trans people, intentionally. And so part of it for me too is that like our spiritual identity existed before a white supremacist religious idea of what faith is. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's so many traditions where baby eating a good meal, baby, is spiritual.
Listen.
Okay.
Listen. Yeah, just even having practices to go through like your day, like in so many different, like a lot of our practices in that book don't necessarily talk about any kind of deities or anything like that, right? Because we do have people that don't necessarily believe in God that are atheists that are also part of this book, right?
That's great. Thank you both so much for that. Cece?
Oh, sorry, was I interrupting? So my question is kind of a question that's about expanding or maybe maybe you guys are already expanding this already, but I'm interested if either one of you have thought about teaching this book. I don't know. And I don't think necessarily, I don't know if schools would be open to this sort of thing, but I'm always thinking about when I hear revolutionary texts, I'm always thinking about how younger people can get access to the information, and whether or not you all are thinking about, maybe you're thinking about having small workshops, or maybe you're gonna, maybe you have access to, spaces that are non-religious where you could, I'm just sort of wondering if you're thinking about expanding. You guys have already talked about a documentary that's already an expanse from the idea from the book, but if you guys are thinking about any educational sort of ideals.
Yeah, so we've actually done a few different workshops as we've been, because like we said earlier, for this book, this has been a process. Like this is like now 3.5 year point, that we were almost 4 years that we've been working on this text together, right? And so we've done everything from workshops on survivorship, right? Theologies of survivorship from this book, and like the sort of pretext from this book, to taking out specific characters and talking about accountability, to talking about sacred sex work and all these different things. So we're very interested in doing workshops we've done that both in religious as well as secular and non-religious spaces. And we foresee that continuing on, right? So a lot of, I think for even many of us, how we learned to do social justice came from our faith spaces, right? And so we're very invested in meeting people at all kinds of places to kind of continue this learning. So if people are listening, watching, engaging right now today, we will, it's also because pandemic, we're doing everything digital. So we can come to you real easy. So you let us know where to be, and we will be there. Okay.
And we've talked about, right? We've talked about often with spiritual spaces that we have been in, that everyone who's in this book, right, are experts on spirituality. And that the way that the system works, right, is that it says, oh, you're published in something. Now we can turn our gaze to you, right? GAZE for anyone at home who's listening. And so, because they're like the gays, no, the gays with a Z.
The gays and the gays. Okay, the gays and the gays.
And so it was also important for us to be able to be like, look at all of these contributors, right? Like, look at them, hire them, book them. They are published. And they've been doing this work, many of them, for very many years. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, that answers my question, because when you guys begin to talk, especially Lady Dane, in your expertise about African traditions and indigenous traditions, I know specifically many of the things that you talk about, a lot of the public is not educated on. So that's why I'm particularly interested in broadening the conversation and thinking about spirituality, not just in a traditional Christian, Western sort of theology. So I think it's really important that you get this work out, that you really, broaden the work as wide as possible. So thank you guys for that.
Yeah, there are temple hymns in there too. Yamaya, right? Like
Orishas, right.
Right. So I'm like, everybody talking about the Orishas now, right? Because Black is King came out. So, because Lemonade.
It's true. Not till Beyonce says it, is it real? There it is.
And I think just that even goes back to our process, because we did spend some intentional prayer time putting this book together. So y'all, we prayed. We specifically chose and said, this is who we're going to speak to every time we talk about this book. This is who we're going to thank. This is who we're laying out libations for. This is who we're leaving offerings for. That's why there's a dedication to Yamaya in the book, right? There
it is.
All these things.
That's better for Yamaya, baby. Okay. That's better for Yamaya.
Yes.
So you mentioned the best place to buy the book is on the website. That's the blacktransprayerbook.org. You also mentioned that you're fundraising for the documentary. If people want to learn more about that, or contact you with bookings, or they want to chip in, whether individually or steer organizational funds your way, is that the best place to track you down? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And the contact form on there goes to both of us, so you can definitely reach us there. Our email is theblacktransprayerbook@gmail.com. But again, you can just go to the website and you can just hit that contact form. It goes right to our email. We'll both get it, and we'll respond to you within 48 hours.
And we have a donate button too, right? We have a donate button.
Yes, we have a
on
donate
the
button.
site.
We have a GoFundMe up so people can do that. Yeah, so that.
Awesome.
Everyone, as we're closing out, we have a question in the chat box here. So I'd like
Great
to read,
question.
yes, there we go. I'd like to read out the question here. The question for both J. Mace and Lady Dane. What is something you learned about yourself as you created this book? It's a very simple question. What is something that you learned about yourself? Maybe that people get on your nerves sometimes, or you know, speaking as someone, no, I'm joking. But I'm just asking anything at all that you would like to mention that you learned about yourself while creating this book as a process.
I think that for myself, and I think I learned a lot of patience. It's like, because usually I'm like, oh, this project, and usually if I would come to Dane, like, let's do this project, like that could be done in like a year. So it's like the fact this took a few years to kind of actually get off the ground.
Yeah.
I think that also, it's been a blessing just to collaborate with Dane. Like we've known each other for a number of years. We've been friends for a number of years. Like we talk almost every day. Like, we're not just working together. We just also enjoy being in each other's presence.
Yeah.
And so just even knowing that you have the kind of collaboration and collaborative partner that you get up and talk to every single day and connect with every single day, that is so valuable, because I think a lot of this work we end up doing in silos, where we don't know what are green lights to say, like, this is actually a person I can connect with on this level. Because that is a very serious relationship to enter into with someone, like outside of your romantic partners, outside of your friendships, to say like, I'm gonna build this thing with you, this piece of history with you, and that we're gonna do this and still love each other after the process, because stuff can get real,
Yeah.
Yes.
I learned how important being in community with of course a person, right? But many people who are not only invested in your survival, but in your thriving. And so there were very many times when, y'all, I was tired. And it wasn't that I wanted to give up, but I just was like, I'm like trying to figure out how to make the thing happen that we need to have happen. And I mean, like, people also don't understand that, like, when you are producing something or you're editing something, sometimes you're up at all hours of the night, y'all. And that was before we really started talking about rest as reparations. Publicly.
And touring during this time. We weren't even on the same time zones all the time. Like, it's just,
yeah.
Wow.
And so, like, there would be moments where, like, I literally would just be like, I am exhausted. And I need some encouragement. And there would be times when he would say, I am exhausted and I need some encouragement. And what that taught me is that, like, it is possible for us to really create this world that we are talking about, right? Oftentimes in theory, but never really, no, I don't want to say it like that. That we're talking about oftentimes in theory, but don't realize that we're also modeling, right? Which is a world of community, restorative justice, love, a world free of oppression that is perpetuated interpersonally, right? We can talk about systemic, right? That's a whole nother thing. But I think that, like, model the type of relationships that you're demanding of the world. And so I learned that it was possible to have that with another person.
That's beautiful. That is a perfect, I feel like, closing. We don't have any more questions here in our box. I think that's a wonderful and beautiful way to end this conversation. Thinking about, I love your phrase, rest is reparations. I love that. That's
from the Nat ministry, right? The Nat ministry talk about that. It's the Nat ministry, right? I want to shout out the Nat ministry, Andy. Shout out to Nat ministry.
Doing that work.
There we go.
Shout them out.
Well, thank you. Like I said, everyone, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Saida, for being a wonderful host and poet extraordinaire. And we also want to thank OutWrite again. Like I said, it's been a wonderful way for us to celebrate, kick off the literary festival. And I don't know, Anthony, is there anything else we need to cover before we go? There should be links to everyone's Instagram, Twitter, I don't know, all those things, website, where you can buy the book. Please, please, please go and purchase the book. I don't have the website at the top of my head, but I'm sure either Dane or Mace could say the website one more time just to reiterate.
blacktransprayerbook.org. So theblacktransprayerbook.org.
That's it, folks.
And if you are someone who's listening to this podcast and you have access to lots of money, if you are in what they call the 10% or the 1%, I invite you to, pull out your wallet and just go ahead and sow a seed.
There it is.
A monetary seed of thanksgiving,
Yes.
of celebration, of communal investment, of how do they say, of reappropriating some funds.
Listen.
If you are in the 1% or 10% or close to it, if you are white, go on and sow that seed. Press that donate button. Thank you so much.
Well, thank everyone for being here. We're going to close out on that note. I think, we also want to thank our interpreter, Rodney, here, who's doing our wonderful interpretation, who has been fantastic today. So we're very excited about that. We want to thank everyone out there for listening. We hope you enjoy the conversation and that you will purchase, and that you will put your money where your thoughts are. Come through with that.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you, y'all.
There it is.